Hey everybody, it's Mr. Jones. I thought we would kick off our videos with Sun Tzu. We're going to look at some very famous people in world history, and why not kick off with one of the greatest military minds of all time. And so Sun Tzu was around 500 BC, 2,500 years ago. So let's talk a little bit about him. And why are we talking about him? Well, it's because we're still dealing with his military tactics today. If we look through history, we have, let's see, in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh used Sun Tzu's tactics against us in that conflict. If we talk about World War II, Erwin Rommel, the tank commander, the Nazi tank commander, he used Sun Tzu's tactics against the Allies. If we go back to the 16th century, Machiavelli wrote about some of the tactics in The Prince. If we go back all the way to, gosh, I don't know, if we go back to Julius Caesar's times, although Julius Caesar was probably never read The Art of War by Sun Tzu, he used these kind of tactics, and we know Julius Caesar did really well. So, what makes Sun Tzu a big deal? Well, in the year 500 BC in China, there was a lot of warring states going on, and so you had a lot of different kingdoms. One of the kings of one of the kingdoms, he was having a problem trying to find a general. And the story I'm about to tell you is anecdotal, which means that it's a really good story, and there probably are some true facets to it, but it may not have happened exactly like I'm about to tell you. And if you look up Sun Tzu on the internet, you're going to see different versions of this story. So I'll just kind of give you a conglomeration of all of them and my favorite version. So it goes like this. The king's looking for a general. He and his first minister are interviewing people, military guys, and saying, can you lead my army? And each time that they find somebody, that person falls apart. He can't do it. So one day Sun Tzu, an educator, a teacher, comes up to the king and says, "Your Majesty, I think I'd like to apply for the job." And the king says, "Sure, but what qualifications do you have?" Sun Tzu says, "Well, I'm a teacher, and kids don't scare me, so I'm not scared of anybody else." And he probably didn't say that. What qualifications do you have? Sun Tzu says, "Well, I don't, but I am the leader of men. I can teach people to do anything. Give me a chance." The first minister and the king conferred, and they both agreed there was no way they're going to give a teacher a chance to be in charge of the army. But Sun Tzu pressed them and said, "No, look, seriously, I can do this. I can do this. Just give me a chance. I tell you what, look, we'll have a tryout. If you give me 100 people, just give me 100 people, and give me a week, I will turn those 100 people into a fighting force that you've never seen before." So the king and the minister both agree and say, or both look at each other and they say, we're not going to take 100 of our soldiers out and give them to Sun Tzu. That makes no sense. Sun Tzu, again, he demanded, he said, "Look, king, seriously, I can do this. I can teach people. Give me 100 people." The first minister grabbed the king and said, "Your Majesty, I think I can come up with a solution here. Hey, Sun Tzu, meet us out on the football field tomorrow. We'll have your 100 people out there, and we'll give you a week. But check this out, Sun Tzu. If you don't do what you promise, if you don't turn these 100 people into a supreme fighting force, you're going to lose your head. We're going to chop it off." Sun Tzu agreed, and the next morning, Sun Tzu walked out onto the football field, and now clearly it's not a football field. I'm just using that as a metaphor for you guys. He walked out onto the football field, And there was the king. There was the king. And there was the first minister. And Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu walked down the football field, and there were 100 people. Stand up. There were 100 people out there on the football field. They were all women, but there were 100 of them. Sun Tzu went up to the king and said, "Excuse me, Your Majesty, what are the 100 women doing here? That's what?" And the first minister said, "Hey, Sun Tzu, you said 100 people. You didn't say 100 men. You said 100 people. There's your 100 people. Go get them. By the way, you have 7 days, and at the end of the 7 days, if these 100 people aren't one of the most ferocious fighting forces we've ever seen, you're going to lose your head." Sun Tzu turned to the king and said, okay, I see what you did there. Okay, I got this." The king and the first minister left. Sun Tzu turned to his troops. He didn't fall down. He turned to his troops and he said, "Ladies, let's begin." And the first day, he taught them how to march in a single file line. And the second day, he taught them how to march kind of like a marching band and do drills and etc., etc. And the third day, he taught them to shoot the bow and arrow. And on the fourth day, he taught them how to use a spear. And on the fifth day, and on this, he was teaching them. On the fifth day, 2 of the women came to the king and prime minister. They were their daughters, the king's daughter, the princess, and the prime minister's daughter, and said, "Your Majesty," now this is secret, Sun Tzu doesn't know anything about this, "Your Majesty, Dad, we're actually learning stuff. Like, we're learning stuff." And the king and the prime minister laugh and say, "Yeah, you're women, you have no idea what you're talking about." "Dad, seriously, we're learning stuff." "Okay, go back. So the 2 go back. And day 6 comes around. And day 7 comes around. And the evening of day 7, the 2 ladies go back up to their dads, and the princess says, "Dad, seriously, we're like good. We know what we're doing. We're really good as a fighting force." The king and the first minister looked at each other, looked at their daughters and said, "All right, just in case you're actually good, we're going to need you to do something." The next morning, out there on the football field, Sun Tzu's out there in front of his 100 troops, the 100 women. The king and the minister come out, the first minister come out, and there's a crowd behind them because everybody is excited to see Sun Tzu fail. The king comes up to Sun Tzu and says, "All right, you ready? You ready? I can't wait." And Sun Tzu says, "Your Majesty, you are going to be so impressed." So Sun Tzu gets there in front of his, he has the ladies form a giant line, company front, and he says, "Troops, forward march." And not one of the women took a step. Not one of the women took a step. The king comes up to Sun Tzu and says, "Sun Tzu, hi, yeah. When you gave that forward march command, they didn't do anything. I got to tell you, I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed. Because you can't even get the women to take a step forward." Wow. So, this is our executioner, so come on over and we're just going to take your head off. I'm going to stand him up. We're going to take your head off. Sun Tzu says, "Your Majesty, I, I request given another chance. You see, maybe I wasn't loud enough. Maybe they didn't hear me. Maybe I wasn't clear enough. May I have another chance? The king turned to the first minister. The first minister winked and laughed and said, yes, let's give him another chance. Sun Tzu said, thank you, your majesty. Sun Tzu went up to the troops and he said, in a much louder, much clearer voice, he said, troops, forward, march. Not one of the women took a step. The king and the prime minister fell over and they were laughing so hard. The crowd was laughing. Everybody was laughing except for Sun Tzu and probably the guy with the giant axe. Sun Tzu went up to the king and he said, your majesty, may I have one last chance? The king said, why? What's the point? You've done it twice. Everybody in the village, everybody in the kingdom heard you say, forward march. Clearly, they don't know how to do it. Sun Tzu said, your majesty, the first time may have been my fault, but the second time was their fault. I ask for one more chance, and after that, your majesty, you may have my head. The prime minister and the king, chuckling, they looked at each other, nodded, agreed to give him one more chance. Sun Tzu said, your majesty, may I borrow your sword? May I borrow your sword? The king gave Sun Tzu his sword. Sun Tzu went up and down the line of the women, and he walked up to one of the women and he said, did you hear my command when I said forward march? And the woman said, I did. Sun Tzu said to the woman, did you understand what I said when I said forward march? And the woman says, I understand. And Sun Tzu said to the woman, did you willfully disobey when I said forward march? And the woman said, I did. Sun Tzu cut her head off, right there in front of the other 99 women. Cut her head off. Sun Tzu went up and down the line, and he went to a second woman, and he said, did you hear me when I said it? She said, I did. Did you understand what I said? She said, I did. Did you willfully disobey? She said, I did. He cut her head off. 98 women. He walked up and down the line, went to a third woman. He said, did you understand me? Did you hear me? Did you understand me? Did you willfully? We're going to get back to that. Sun Tzu walked back up to the king, handed the king his sword. Sun Tzu walked back up to the 98 women, and he said in a normal, quiet voice, troops, forward march. And all 98 women took a step forward. And for the next hour, Sun Tzu drilled the women. He showed the king and the prime minister what the women could do in their drills. The women shot bows and arrows. I guess shot arrows out of the bows. Used spears. Showed them sword work. Showed them marching drills. And the crowd oohed and awed. At the end of the hour, Sun Tzu told the women, parade rest. And so they all just stood there, the 98 women. Sun Tzu went up to the king and he said, your majesty, I present to you the greatest fighting force that you've ever seen. And the king turned to the first minister and turned back to Sun Tzu and said, Sun Tzu, I gotta admit, they're pretty dang good. I mean, they're pretty good. They may be the best I've ever seen. And if that's what you can do with women, I can't wait to see what you can do with men, trained soldiers. Sun Tzu said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." The king said, "However, we have a problem. You see, you killed two of your troops." Sun Tzu said, "Yes, I know. I had to get their attention." The king said to Sun Tzu, "Sun Tzu, there's something you don't know. The two women that you killed, one of them was the princess, my daughter in disguise, and the other was the first minister's daughter. You killed our daughters." Sun Tzu said, "Your Majesty, I know." The king turned to the first minister, turned back to Sun Tzu and said, "You're hired." Sun Tzu went on to become the general of the Chinese army and did extremely well. He's going to go on and write a book called The Art of War. The Art of War is not very long. It's only, I don't know, 50, 60 pages. You can download The Art of War from Google, just The Art of War PDF. It's been out of copyright now for 2,425 years, so I think you're good. You can go to any bookstore or anything on Amazon and order it. I would show you my copy, but it's currently locked up in the school and none of us can get in. Some of the things that Sun Tzu says in The Art of War, probably the most famous is that the art of war is deceiving your enemy. So, for example, pretend to be weak when you are actually strong. Pretend to be on top of the hill when you're actually behind the hill. Pretend to be that you're going after point A, but you're actually going after point B. Pretend that. Make sure your enemy has no idea what's going on. I started this by saying that the United States, we were involved in some wars that the enemy used the art of war against us, some of the strategies. However, we have used it recently in the past in Desert Storm, in Operation Desert Storm. We used it against the Iraqis. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, the United States of America, our lead general, his name is General Norman Schwarzkopf, he used some of Sun Tzu's tactics to remove the Iraqis from Kuwait. When Schwarzkopf was in front of the news press afterwards, after the battle was over, and the news press said, "Now, how did you come up with those strategies? I mean, that was amazing what you did." Schwarzkopf reached into his pocket and he pulled out a copy of The Art of War, and he said, "I just read Sun Tzu, and I just used his strategies." And one of the newspaper reporters said, "But that book is 2,500 years old. How you can't use, please note that Saddam Hussein, he probably has a copy himself, right?" And Norman Schwarzkopf basically said, "Yeah, he probably has a copy, but he probably didn't do his homework. He probably didn't read it," which is why. Okay, guys, so that's The Art of War by Sun Tzu. I'd encourage you guys to read it, or if you just go to Wikipedia and look at some of its very famous quotes, and you can apply The Art of War to a lot of areas of your life, maybe even against the virus that we're dealing with right now. All right, that's our first personal world history, and We'll go to the next one next time I film. See you on the flip side. Stay safe. Stay at your house. Be good. Bye.